Kia ora, everyone, and welcome back to Stripped and Unscripted. I'm Vixen Temple.
And I am Madeline.
And welcome to our first official korero. We have a topic today we're going to get into, but before we do, just want to note that the sound quality might not be the best for these first two episodes, but please stay with us. We are in our early days, but we promise it will improve over time and the korero will be worth it. We promise you that. So today's episode is about respectability politics and tone policing anger. This is a topic or topics that Madeline and I both have very strong feelings on. So before we go into the unscripted part of the episode, I just want to quickly define what respectability politics is. So the term politics of respectability was coined by Professor Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham in her 1993 book, Righteous Discontent, The Woman's Monument in the Black Baptist Church. So essentially the idea of respectability politics refers to this notion that oppressed, marginalized people should behave in a way that is appeasing and palatable and socially acceptable to the people in power that are causing their oppression. What respectability politics is trying to do, it is marginalized groups' way of attempting to humanize themselves by showcasing common ground between themselves and their oppressors. To quote Professor Higginbotham in her book, quote, "These are the respectable people. Look at these people. They're not even different from us. Their cause is something that we can identify with. The problem is how the marchers are dressed should not interfere with their right to vote. The truth of the matter is white people can dress any kind of way and have a right to vote." End quote. So in Professor Higginbotham's book, she talks a lot about the struggles of the Black liberation movement and how they often had to appease the white colonial standards and act in a way that is, accessible and palatable to white supremacist ideologies. But in this episode, we're going to be touching more on our experiences as sex workers and sex work activists and giving examples of ways that we have been tone policed and all of that. So I will pass it over to Madeline now, who's going to share her thoughts on respectability politics, and then we'll sort of just go from there. So take it away, Madeline.
Yeah, so I guess specifically for my own experience and probably Vixen's as well, the way that are experiencing tone policing or respectability politics the most is sort of when we address things that have gone on in whatever space that they have gone on, and we are sort of painted as bullies or aggressive or combative, hostile, and that is kind of used as a way to discredit our initial argument. It sort of derails the entire conversation because it can be used to sort of be like, well, I won't engage with you because you're so aggressive, or you're way too aggressive, so I'm not going to listen to you kind of situation, which just completely shifts the narrative away from the actual issue and actually seeking some accountability from that issue. And so, yeah, I think when me and Vixen speak online, and again, this happens to so many other people in marginalized communities, it's really not just me and Vixen, but when we do speak online, we're both very firm, but I wouldn't necessarily say that we're overly, nasty or anything, but I could be just about as nice as I possibly can be, and we're quite often still met with the whole, like, you need to show some respect, you need to not bully people, X, Y, Z. And I think we both, it's a very frustrating thing to be met with because it really does shift the entire conversation away from what it initially was about. And it's frustrating that a lot of people don't know about tone policing or respectability politics because it really is quite a simple concept if you kind of dig into it. It is very confusing if you use a lot of the kind of bigger, more political like jargon that goes alongside it. But the concept of it is really quite simple. It's just that you are essentially derailing an argument by telling the person who you have harmed that they are too aggressive to engage in the conversation with you. Which like is, I don't know how to put this in like a a respectable or nice way. It's just really shitty. It's really frustrating. It's also really hurtful because we know that, especially for the marginalized group that we will speak most about, which is S workers, we are sort of dehumanized and demonized just for existing. And so to then experience that in a further layer when we are trying to communicate to the people who have caused harm or upset us or triggered us or XYZ, it just stigmatizes us further. You're putting that, what would be the word here? You're sort of like, you're just furthering the stigma, essentially. You're just putting a layer on top of it that was not needed at all. And for the people doing it, it actually just allows them to run away from any form of accountability or actual dialogue.
Yep. And just adding on to what you said about how it really derails the conversation, so we should probably define what tone policing is. So, quote, tone policing is defined as a conversational tactic that dismisses the ideas being communicated based on the emotional delivery of the message. It occurs when someone critiques your tone instead of engaging with the substance of your message, often used to derail discussions by focusing on emotional delivery rather than content. This tactic can silence important narratives, particularly from marginalized groups, end quote. So the topic of tone policing reminds me of this concept of reactive abuse, which I describe as you're poking a bear and then the bear turns around and growls at you and you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe you just growled at me. That was like so unprovoked, so unnecessary. Meanwhile, you were poking the bear. And it's something that, again, oppressors use quite a lot on the people that they are oppressing. It's that there really is no appropriate way to react to being oppressed. If you're angry, it's just further proof that you deserve to be oppressed and governed and policed. But if you're, polite and palatable, you're just really accepting it. And I'm not about that personally. I'm more about honoring my anger. And if someone's going to piss me off, I'm going to get angry and I'm going to stand up for myself. And I can think of an example in my life where I've been the victim of reactive abuse and how that was weaponized against me to essentially be like, well, look at what I have to put up with. This person is like emotionally unstable and like needs me there to be an authoritative figure on their life. It's so infantilizing. It's so gross. But, okay. I remember one night there was a new dancer, a baby stripper, and in that club we used to put our own music on via Spotify. And there was a girl dancing on stage and then her music cut off and suddenly like screaming metal music came on. And I knew that was not her music. I looked over at the DJ booth and the baby stripper was just standing there with this look of absolute horror on her face. And I thought, oh shit, she's accidentally clicked away from the music. So I ran into the DJ booth. I sent the baby dancer away and was like, tell me your songs. I'll sort it out. I flicked it to the other music. I saved the situation. The strip club manager pokes her head round and goes, what the fuck are you doing? And I was like, sorry, such and such just mixed up the music. I'm just fixing it. She was like, don't blame her. What the fuck are you doing? And I was like, no, sorry. Like, I'm not blaming her. I'm just explaining to you what's happened. I've just fixed it. Don't worry. It's all over now. And she was like, what the fuck is with your attitude? I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? She's like, you have a fucking attitude problem. Get the fuck backstage. Go the fuck backstage. So I went backstage. I'm like starting to cry at this point because I'm like, why am I being yelled at for like fixing the situation? And then she comes backstage. She starts going off at me about how I'm fucked in the head from having an abortion. Something I had told her in secret. Yep. Something I told her in secret. That abortion I had before I even became a stripper. She starts going off at me. You're so fucked in the head. You have such a fucking attitude problem. You think you're fucking better than everyone. You're fucked in the head. You had an abortion. You clearly are not fit to work in this fucking industry. I start crying and I'm like, whoa, like this is so uncalled for. Like, why are you having a go at me? She was like, that's it. I'm so fucking sick of your shit. Pack your shit and go the fuck home. You're suspended for a week. We will talk about your contract next week. And so, right, I start bawling my eyes out. I'm in absolute hysterics. And she's using that to be like, you're crazy, you're mentally unwell, go home, you cannot work tonight, you're not fit to work this shift. I was fine until she stuck her head into the conversation. And so that was a moment for me that I really realized throughout your life, you will be taunted and shat on and abused. And the second you react in any way that is hostile, quote unquote, that person can use it to be like, look, she's crazy. This is what I have to put up with. So apologies for the trauma dump.
Firstly, want to acknowledge that is really, really horrible, and that's really traumatic that you had to go through that, so I'm really sorry. It's like, it's even more, like I said earlier, it's even more layered when you are a sex worker, because there is already that just like inherent, or is that the right word? Stigma that comes with just having the label sex worker over your head, to then try to communicate, to have someone turn around and paint you as XYZ, crazy, hostile, aggressive, yada, 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 which just to other people who are observing the situation confirms to them their already ingrained stigma toward you, just takes us how many steps back every single time it happens, and it's just incredibly frustrating.
So leading up to recording this episode, I linked a essay that I found to Madeline about respectability politics, and I will put it in the show notes because I highly recommend checking it out and reading it. It is just beautifully written. It's so fantastic. And it's really important to note that respectability politics gets weaponized a lot, especially against women of color. So we all know about like the trope of like the angry black woman, and how when they are being attacked, they are so careful in how they have to communicate their discomfort, because if they raise their voice ever so slightly, it's so easy for white women to cry, oh my gosh, white women tears are very powerful. And it's so easy for them to say, oh my gosh, you're being aggressive, and for other people to now side with the person that was causing harm in the first place, because what respectability politics does is it turns the oppressors into the victims. Like, we are being attacked. I think I recently compared it on my Instagram story to like when you're dating a toxic person. In my instances, it's always been men, and they're behaving in a way that is toxic, and you sit them down and you're like, hey babe, like this thing you're doing is causing me harm. Could we please like talk about it? And suddenly they're like crying and throwing up and being like, oh my God, I can't believe you're telling me the ways that my actions have caused you harm. Like, I'm being attacked. I am just so being unfairly villainized right now. And then suddenly you're coddling them, and you have to put your emotions aside and discomfort aside for their comfort. And it's so insidious. It's so unfair, because it just teaches you to detach yourself from your very valid reaction to that, to put the other person's feelings before yours, when they're the ones that have been causing you harm. They're the ones that have upset you. And you're sitting there now being like, oh my gosh, I now need to coddle this person because me talking about the ways that this has impacted me is making them feel bad. And I don't want to make them feel bad. Make them fucking feel bad. They made you feel fucking bad. Why the fuck should you not? Why shouldn't they feel bad? That's how they keep getting away with it, because they just keep getting coddled through it, and like they never get held accountable for it, because oh my God, like I'm the victim here. Like, no, you're not. You're not the victim here.
So frustrating, like, and I when we experience this, and it's going to be really, really hard for you and I not to talk about our most recent experiences with this, but we'll get into that at a later date as well. But when we experience this, I sit there and I think in my head and I go, are these people aware that when they do this, it is respectability politics or it's tone policing, and are they aware that it's a tactic? Because it really is just the easiest cop-out, isn't it? It really seems to be just the trigger finger reaction is to be like, there needs to be mutual respect. Really, it does drag people onto their side. Unfortunately, because it victimizes them, I think in a lot of these, not just in the sex work conversation, but in sort of conversations along these lines within marginalized communities, if you are being accused of harm or people are calling you out on your harm, your job is actually to just sit down and listen and take that in and provide reassurance and promises that you will do better, or that you didn't necessarily mean to do what you did, instead of to then clap back to say, you are too aggressive. Because a lot of people who are more vulnerable to, is misinformation the right word? Or just not quite as like informed on this topic, will see you turning around and saying, you're too aggressive, you're too much, you're victimizing me, and they will side with you. It is really easy to hide behind people who are perpetrating harm in whatever way that they are doing it, whether they are aware or not. It is really easy to turn around and demonize the people who are bringing it to your attention, because it's really hard for you to sit there and realize, oh, okay, yes, I have made a misstep here and I need to handle this well. It's a deflection tactic. And it's like when you experience it, when it happens to you, when you are tone policed, it's like talking to a brick wall. It's like you're trying so hard to get your point across. And like, for me, in one of our more recent situations, I tried every angle. Like, I really tried all levels of respectability, from very to not so much. I definitely didn't get super disrespectful, but I really tried to bring it to this like almost incriminatingly respectable level.
Yeah.
And even that does not get through. And you are still painted in this sort of like, hostile, divisive sort of way. And what that tells me is that it was never actually about the respectability in the first place. It was always about derailing the initial argument. It is, when you are sitting, and me and you, Vixen, you know, again, really hard to not talk about our most recent thing. So those of you from Aotearoa, I'm really sorry. A lot of you will know what I'm talking about. But it was really hard to sit there knowing that everything that and this doesn't just go for this situation, but it goes for a lot of situations. Whenever I speak out on something, and I know you're the same, Vixen, we are so meticulous with the way that we write. We are so thoughtful and measured, and, you know, we're so measured with the way that we write things. I will write things and I will simmer on them for days. Like, maybe not days, but a day.
Wait, just to add to that, and then you carry on. You and I constantly actually check in with each other to be like, are we being reasonable? We send drafts to each other. We're like, is this too much? Like, just want to add that. You carry on.
Yeah. And it's not just you that I did that with. I do that with a lot of people who I really, friends that would call me out. We're so measured, and I simmer on things. I make sure that I don't speak from reaction. I speak from the heart, and I speak with facts and firmness, but I don't just hit the post button after I've seen something. And so it's really hard to sit there and know that that's been the way that you've approached something, and to still hit that brick wall of tone policing. Like, when you've worked so hard to try to, we've effectively tone policed ourselves to try to get through to people, because they are going to inevitably tone police us, and that still doesn't work. And so again, it just feeds back into this idea of it being never about your amount of respectability, and way more about whether or not someone is receptive to hearing what you have to say in whatever tone that you wish to say it in. Oh man.
One more thing I wanted to add before we go into mutual respect. You touched on something that is in this essay here about in-group policing. So I'm going to read the essay just really quickly. It says, quote, "Respectability narratives also drive in-group ostracization. In order to showcase similarities with the dominant group, certain segments of marginalized groups that hold more privileges often distance themselves from people they perceive as quote-unquote less respectable within their own group in order to deflect negative stereotypes," end quote. So I can absolutely relate to this. There are women out there who may identify as feminists, but they don't want to be seen as an angry, misandrous man-hater. I think they firmly believe that, you know, the way to get men on our side is to, like, be nice to them. It's to lean into respectability politics and to act in a way that men will want to join the feminist movement. But for me, that's just making it about the men. It's making it about the oppressors by prioritizing their comfort, when historically men have caused horrible circumstances for women living under patriarchy. And so I think it's very justified in me to be angry and to go on a misandrist rant. And it can be quite frustrating when I can sense women who don't want to be seen as the angry misandrist and the angry man-hater, very like, just, okay, like, let's just tone it down a little bit. It doesn't enable people to listen to what I have to say, which I think is very important, what I have to say. I have a lot of really good criticism towards patriarchy. And when people aren't willing to listen to me when I'm angry about it, that to me is just conforming to patriarchal white supremacist standards of like, you have to be nice. Especially patriarchal, like women need to be nice and agreeable and subordinate. I don't want to be those things. I do get angry when I talk about the things that I'm passionate about because I'm angry. And if I have to center my oppressor's feelings so much, that is just me carrying on living under a patriarchal construct that my catchphrase is burn the patriarchy for a reason. So again, like I understand where those women are coming from, where they're sort of tone policing me and saying like, oh, don't get so angry, like men won't listen to us. Well, they don't fucking listen to us when we ask nicely. So fuck, the same way that I wouldn't expect people of color to discuss the ways that me having white skin has inherently caused harm to people of color. And I don't expect people of color to approach that conversation with me in a way that's going to, prioritize my comfort, because it's always been about my comfort as a white skinned person. And it's always been about male comfort under a patriarchy. It's so frustrating when you're just trying to have a conversation and people within your own community who want to be more accepted by the mainstream public to the point where they reject the things about themselves that even make them marginalized in the first place. I get it, okay? I get wanting to be accepted by the mainstream public. It's survival. And unfortunately, we're all living under a white supremacist patriarchal society that does say we have to behave a certain way in order to create an income. I can't fault people for leaning into respectability politics, but
I still think that, even we can't fault them, right? It's still really important to understand how respectability politics can be incredibly negative.
yes,
I think we can, what would be the word? We can't fault them because it's completely understandable. I'm sure you and I have done it many times. It's a very natural thing as a human to want to protect yourself, and that is a not an easy way, but it's at times an effective way to actually sort of skirt any of the extra stigma that might be attached to what we're saying or doing. Yep. But a lot of the times it actually stigmatizes people who are absolutely not going down that route. And so it's important to acknowledge both ends of that.
Absolutely. I can actually think of a time where I have leaned into respectability politics. I remember when I was in Tamaki Makaurau for the 20 years decrim of sex work hui, Catherine Healy invited me to come on the Good Morning show with her. And I remember that morning it was 6 a.m. I woke up in my hotel room. I was getting dressed and I was thinking, okay, I'm about to go on the Good Morning show. I was so intentional with how I dressed. I wore this really nice red dress. I put my hair in a bun. I put my glasses on. I wanted to look normal and academic because I understood this is the Good Morning show. There are people just getting ready for their day. I can't go on right now looking like a hooker. I have to go on looking like an ordinary citizen. And I remember going on the show, being very careful of the language I used. I did say that I found sex work empowering, which I know can bother some people because it shouldn't have to be empowering for it to be acceptable. And that's something that I still sometimes think about and I cringe over because I was in that moment very mindful of the audience I was speaking to, just the general public. And I was leaning into respectability politics then. But then an opposite example of that, and then, sorry, I'll let you talk about mutual respect, but an opposite example of that was when Fired Up Stilettos and I first protested on Parliament grounds with a stripper pole in our lingerie. Iconic. Historical. Iconic. Right? Yeah. We made history that day. No one has ever done that. Yeah. And that is what protesting is. It is disruptive. It is getting attention. It is causing people to look at you. What we were doing with that, what Fired Up Stilettos is trying to do is to shed light on the things in the industry that have been kept in the dark. So to bring this taboo world in broad daylight in the middle, like 2:00 on a Wednesday afternoon on Parliament grounds was intentional. And we put a picture up of us on Twitter, and some dude replied being like, love the cause, guys, but I think people would be more inclined to respect you if you weren't in your stripper lingerie. And it was just like, right?
You're missing the point.
That right there is respectability politics. This man just said with his whole chest, I would respect strippers more if you didn't look like strippers. If you didn't act like the community that you were trying to get respect for and rights for. So that, honestly, is the best example I have of respectability politics.
Yeah, so you are telling on yourself.
Right. I don't, that's what it is. I want to respect you, but I can't when you look.
I don't.
No, not when you look like this, because I don't respect strippers. I don't respect women in their lingerie.
I want to say that tone policing isn't always super obvious, especially to people who maybe haven't experienced it or are sort of new to learning about it. It is not always someone just turning around and saying, well, you're an aggressive bitch. It's not necessarily that. It can be very covert. It can be very disguised. And so it's important when you read things like this or you listen to things, that you think, is there an element of these people, this group, this collective, whatever it may be, trying to imply that these people are too angry to be listened to? Or are they trying to imply that the people's anger has victimized them? You have to dig in quite deep to find that sometimes. That doesn't make it any less tone policing. Even if it is covert and it is sort of snuck in there, it is the exact same thing. Because subconsciously, it is creating this, what am I trying to say here? I don't want to say the word vibe, because I hate that, but you get what I mean. It creates this like underlying tone and vibe of these people are too aggressive. They fucked up by being too aggressive. So like, too aggressive. We don't want to, no. Yeah. If you get a whiff of that, that is tone policing. And I would really love to encourage people to just like think about that and keep an eye out for that, even though it might not outwardly be obvious to you.
Yeah. Yep. Like,
but
sorry.
No, you go.
Just
example.
Yeah, just how our good friend in the States, Bam Rose, really educated me on the terminology dog whistling, which is essentially like politicians use it a lot, where it's using very specific language that just the general public can read as just harmless, whatever. But there's an undertone, like, how a dog whistle is silent, but dogs can hear it. There's this undertone of aggression and violence towards the people it's projected at. Like, fucking David Seymour uses this a lot. Like, I didn't outwardly say that Moldy is stupid. I just said blah, blah, blah.
That is the thing, is once you see it, you can't unsee it. That is exactly the point of this podcast, is that we really want to help spark this thought process and this critical analysis, so that people who may not have been able to see tone policing in the past might now pick up on it. And then maybe potentially that will create a little bit more empathy toward why S-workers become quite upset around these situations, because like we said, there's a bandwidth. You get to this point of talking to a brick wall for so long, and like anyone, you're going to snap. You're going to get really upset, and then it gets even worse. You are further tone policed. And so, yeah, mutual respect. I had a few corridors with some people around this recently. This has been a term that's been used for quite a while, obviously. It's not a new thing. I've just noticed a bit of an uptake in it recently. It is always used to me, it always seems to be used in support of the oppressing party. It is so incredibly frustrating to have people tell you that you need to have mutual respect when mutual respect could have never existed in the first place due to the oppressing party already disrespecting you. And so a lot of that it cancels itself out in a sense. To have someone disrespect you, to have you then turn around and say, sorry guys, you can probably hear my dog's got something to say as well. It is really frustrating when someone disrespects you, you tell them they've disrespected you, and they in turn reply to you that you need to have mutual respect for them. We can't have mutual respect because there was never respect in the first place.
Absolutely. I think the term mutual respect, I can be so real here and say that it triggers me on a personal level because every person I know that has used the word mutual respect has been a straight up abuser to me. Like strip club management used it a lot when we would try to, you know, come together as strippers and like come to management with like, hey, here's some like issues that we have. They immediately throw it out. They're like, well, you didn't come at us with respect, so we don't want to hear it. But it's like, and also, and again, I feel like we always are being so respectful, and it's just, like you said, it counts. It doesn't exist in the first place because the mutual respect was not even there in the first place, and I think I just want to be very clear on that this is a term that genuinely triggers me to my core because I feel like 90% of the people in my life that have used the term mutual respect to me were people that wanted to keep me oppressed and not have autonomy or sovereignty. And it's something that when I hear that term, like I have to go regulate my emotions because it brings up so many memories of just being met with complete hostility by the people trying to say that I was being hostile.
I understand the idea. The idea is ideal. It would be great if we could have mutual respect. It would be awesome. But in the case, and I want to speak specifically about sex workers, need I even dive into this? S workers have not been respected for a millennia. You can watch any period movie that you want to watch, and there are S workers in that movie being openly disrespected. It is so ingrained in our culture. S workers are disrespected, dehumanized, persecuted, all of those awesome words. And so when an S worker comes to you and is like, hey, this thing that you've done is fucked up and it's not cool, to turn around and meet them with, well, there needs to be mutual respect, is out of touch in my opinion. Again, I understand the sentiment, but it is always used as a way for the oppressing party to skirt accountability. And I actually don't often see S workers using that phrase. We ask for respect. We kind of like try to share experience and beg people to have empathy and whatnot for us, but I genuinely don't think I have ever seen an S worker use the words, can we have mutual respect for each other? It is always the oppressing party turning that around on the S worker because they perceive the S worker who is raising the concerns to be an aggressive sex worker.
And because it's disrupting the system of privilege that they have, the same way that when men say, oh, I want to talk about feminist issues with mutual respect, or when cis people demand mutual respect from the trans community, or when white people say that black people need to act in a way that is mutual respect. We do not need to get into the history of what black people have been subjected to, or indigenous people, or any oppressed minority. We're all, it's 2025. We all fucking know. We all exist on the internet. There's this really good quote here in the essay that says, when necessary, the dominant group can and will maneuver and change respectability to suit their agenda. And that's what we were touching on earlier, is that the thing about respectability politics is that the person setting the tone for respectability is usually the people causing the harm. So they get to set the terms for like what respect looks like for them. And for them, it's usually being able to just be enabled. They do not want to be held accountable. It's that really good quote, like accountability looks like an attack to privileged people who are not ready to sit with the way that their privilege has caused harm to groups in regards, especially like the sex workers. Yeah, look at us. We do not need to tell you how we are treated. We know it. It's so normalized that it's a joke. Like, I remember growing up just hearing constant jokes about S workers, like, oh, if you like don't pay a S worker, is it rape or is it shoplifting? Like, just disgusting jokes that are inherently we are a marginalized group, on top of the fact that we are made up of women, trans, black, brown, indigenous, disabled, single mothers, like such marginalized people already. And when the dominant group gets to assert the tone of respectability, they can and will maneuver it to suit their agenda, to avoid accountability, to further pathologize the people that are just trying to have a, in their words, respectful kōrero. It is very insidious to a point where it's violent in a micro way that is a dog whistle. It's so easy for microaggression. We all fucking know what that term is. It's so easy for people to, the general public to look at that and be like, well, I thought that was respectful on the other person's end. No, it wasn't, because the respect was not there in the first place, especially in regards to pole fit. We're going to talk about this more in a future episode. But the hashtag not a stripper only happened 10 years ago, and it's never really properly been addressed. It's been swept under the rug, and anyone that brings it up, it's like, no, we don't want to talk about that.
But still making its round when I came into pole, which was 5 years ago. Like, I was seeing it pretty common, like pretty regularly then. I find it really fascinating. This is a kind of a side note. I've actually got 2 side notes to add here, but I find it really fascinating when people preface their tone policing with not to tone police, but I find that to be really, because you know you're doing it, and yet you continue to do it. If you are informed enough to understand what it means and what it is and how it affects everyone, and yet you will do it anyway, which is frustrating. But also, I think in regards to, this might be a bit of a like off-topic thing to say, but in regards to us not having to talk about how downtrodden S workers are in the wider society, I think something that's really interesting that I experience as a pole instructor that is so frequent in studios and online is that I think because, and this is not to say that sex workers are widely accepted in the pole fit community, but in the spaces that I inhabit, they tend to be not supported necessarily or like uplifted necessarily, but accepted. So this is a thing. But I think because of that, and because pole has this very interesting, intoxicating way about it where it draws in hobbyists and it becomes very much someone's identity. And this is not a bad thing or a good thing, this is just an observation, but because you get drawn into that space and you become such a part of it at a core level that you just as a sort of person start to accept and acknowledge that there are S workers in the space, you start to forget the way that society outside of that space treats sex workers, because you are not necessarily seeing it happen in the groups that you are in, but the world outside of pole is so unkind to S workers. And I think that it is really easy to forget that in a pole studio because it's better. It's not perfect. It's not great. It's better than society, but that makes it really easy to forget the way that the wider society actually treats sex workers, which is horrifically, like truly horrifically. Yeah.
Wow, Madeline, that was such a good point that I was trying not to make any noise because I didn't want to like impact the quality. But I am sitting here with my mouth on the floor. Fuck. No. Okay.
Yes.
Madeline.
It's a thing, you know, when you're sort of emulating them, in a sense, S workers, you forget that the rest of the world sort of shits on us all the time. Well, not sorta, super. And yeah, it's good to just give yourself a quick little reality check and go, oh, these people actually don't have a right to exist in a lot of spaces, and are just genuinely in danger in most spaces, and we just need to check in and just remind ourselves of that sometimes, yeah.
And also, just to add to that, I think, like, yas queening and embodying strippers and being inspired by them is not the same as respecting them.
100%.
But that's a conversation for a future episode. I think we're almost at the hour mark, so I think we've talked enough about respectability politics. So we hope that makes sense to people. If people will only support me because they see themselves in me, that is really scary to me, because that means that support can be revoked the second I act in a way that makes them uncomfortable. It's not authentic, sustainable allyship or support. It's dangerous, it's tone policing, it's walking on eggshells. And I have spent years healing that inner child in myself that learned to suppress things about myself in order to be accepted. Now that I'm older, I lean into that. I lean into the monstrous feminine. I lean into my differences because I'm proud of them. They make me who I am. They're how I navigate the world. And I shouldn't have to behave in a way that is, oh yeah, no, I'll accept that. But the second you act up, oh no, I'm taking your rights away. Like, fuck off. But anyways, before we sign off, I'm just going to pass back to Madeline, because she has a really beautiful story, of an example of a time that a friend of hers just allowed her to sort of honor her anger and vent and didn't have to tone police herself, and how healing that was for her. So I'm going to pass that off to Madeline to tell us your little story.
A really, really good friend of mine from Poneke, Wellington, who obviously we live in different cities, so we don't see each other very often, and when we do, it's amazing. But we did a festival performance together at the start of last year, and she is an incredible ally, genuinely incredible ally. And we didn't necessarily know each other super well at the time, but she started to ask me questions about the whole thing, and she kind of got me going. And I'm very passionate about the entire topic, so I can be quite emotive when I speak about it. And she just sat there and listened to me be really angry about it, and asked me questions and listened to me in a very, very active way and empathetic way. And I couldn't see any resistance on her face. It was just, she was just listening to me. And even I kind of realized toward the end of the conversation that I had been quite emotive, that I had been quite quite sharp, not sharp with my words, but very, very assertive and firm with my words. And she didn't push at me. It was because of that I had been able to get so lost in that conversation with her and become emotive. And I was surprised. I was like, oh damn, like I just kind of went for it just then, because she gave me the space to, and it was really empowering and it was really reassuring. And it doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much to just listen. And even though you may hear things that you feel that they spark some guilt or some resistance in your heart, just sit with it. And when we say just sit with it, sitting with it is just that. It is just sit on your ass, stay still, and think in your mind about that and why that is causing resistance or not causing resistance or XYZ before you hit the trigger and you react, whether it be positive or negative. It's just important to give yourself a moment to think about what you're hearing and why you're having feelings about it before you turn around. And yeah.
Gorgeous. I love that. It really is just a good example of, how healing it can actually be to have someone listen to you and not tone police you, and just allow you to have that moment to talk about the ways, just how you feel about the ways that others' actions have indirectly or directly caused you harm. But cool. So I think that's a really good story to end on a positive note. So tēnā koutou to everyone for listening. Aroha nui, and we will see you in the next episode of Stripped and Unscripted with Vixen Temple and Madeline. Mwah.
Yeah, see you later, guys.
Bye.